The massive viewing chamber of Harmony's Gate space station buzzed with the familiar sounds of diplomatic chatter. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any single-world observer. The Zalathi floated in their crystal containers filled with purple gas, while the insect-like cricks clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. Tall, elegant Valens with their silver skin stood beside the stocky, earth-toned Gorvani delegates. Ambassador Threl Korvash of the Dominion Council adjusted his ceremonial robes and called the quarterly assembly to order. His forearms gestured gracefully as his translated voice echoed through the chamber's communication systems. This was the 317th such gathering, and like all the others, it would focus on trade agreements, territorial disputes, and the endless bureaucracy that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. Today's agenda includes the mineral rights dispute in the Kepler sector, Threl Korvash announced, his translator converting his native clicks and whistles into something each species could understand. We also have updates on the new shipping lanes through the Andromeda Spiral, and a routine review of quarantine protocols. The quarantine protocols were always routine. In the outer rim of the galaxy, there were dozens of worlds that had developed primitive spaceflight but had not yet been deemed ready for full galactic contact. The Council had strict rules about such things. Young species needed time to mature, to prove they could handle the responsibilities of interstellar civilization. Most took several centuries to develop. The proper diplomatic structures and peaceful mindset required for membership. The humans in Sector 7G have achieved faster-than-light travel, reported Sub-Ambassador Vex, a thin, green-skinned Altarian with large black eyes. Our monitoring stations detected their first successful jump 3 standard cycles ago. They appeared to be exploring their immediate stellar neighborhood with typical primitive curiosity. A few delegates showed mild interest. New species were not uncommon, though the humans had achieved FTL slightly faster than most worlds. Their planet had been classified as a Class 12 death world, which meant it was unusually dangerous by galactic standards, but that often produced hardy species with good survival instincts. Such worlds had given the galaxy some of its most reliable engineers and soldiers, once properly civilized. "What is their technological level?" asked Diplomat Jera 9, speaking through her mechanical translation device. The crystalline Etherian could only communicate through harmonic vibrations that required special equipment to interpret. "Primitive but promising," Vex replied, consulting his datapad. "They use chemical rockets for in-system travel and have recently developed quantum tunnel drives for FTL. Their ships are crude but functional. They have basic energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, nothing that poses any threat to established civilizations. Any signs of aggressive tendencies?" This came from General Korath, the military representative from the hegemony worlds. His people had been warriors before joining galactic civilization, and he always asked about new species' potential for violence. "They have internal conflicts, as most primitive worlds do," Vex answered. "However, their conflicts appear to be decreasing as they focus more on space exploration." Standard development pattern. They show typical death world resilience and pack-bonding behaviors. Nothing unusual. The discussion moved on to more pressing matters. Trade negotiations between the merchant guilds and the agricultural cooperatives had reached an impasse over grain shipment schedules. The Zalathi were complaining about unauthorized mining operations near their sacred crystal gardens. 3 different species were claiming the same uninhabited system based on ancient star charts that might or might not be authentic. Hours passed in the usual diplomatic dance. Representatives argued over clauses and subclauses. Translator systems worked overtime to convert concepts that often had no equivalent between species, and committees were formed to study problems that committees had been studying for decades. This was the foundation of galactic peace, endless talking that prevented the endless fighting that had once plagued the stars. Ambassador Threl Korvash was beginning to think about calling for the lunch recess when the chamber's warning system activated. A soft blue light began pulsing throughout the room, and a gentle tone indicated that the station's long-range sensors had detected something worth attention. "Apologies for the interruption," came the voice of Station Commander Helix over the communication system. "We are detecting an approaching fleet of unknown configuration. They are moving at significant speed toward Council space and will reach the outer monitoring stations within 6 standard hours. The chamber fell silent. Unknown fleets were rare but not unheard of. Sometimes trading expeditions from distant sectors took shortcuts through Council space. Sometimes scientific missions got lost and needed assistance. Occasionally, pirates or raiders tried to probe Council defenses, though they rarely got far against the superior technology and coordinated fleets of member worlds. "What is their configuration?" asked General Korath, his voice carrying the professional interest of a career military officer. "That is where it becomes interesting," Commander Helix replied. "The ships do not match any known design in our databases. They appear to be constructed primarily of metal alloys with unusual geometric patterns, very angular, almost aggressive in appearance. They are also moving faster than our sensors initially calculated." "How fast?" This time it was Threl Korvash himself who asked. "Fast enough that they will reach this station in 3 hours, not 6, and they are not slowing down." A murmur of concern rippled through the assembly. Ships that did not slow down when approaching diplomatic stations were either in serious distress or had hostile intentions. The Council had protocols for both situations, but the unknown nature of these vessels added an element of uncertainty. "Have they responded to standard greeting protocols?" asked Sub-Ambassador Vex. "We have transmitted greetings in all standard languages and mathematical sequences. They have not responded to any communication attempts. However, our sensors indicate they are definitely scanning us. Their technology appears more advanced than our initial estimates suggested." The delegates began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Non-responsive ships with advanced scanning technology usually meant one of two things: either a completely unknown species with technology beyond current understanding, or a known species using heavily modified ships for purposes they did not want to announce. "Recommendations?" Threl Korvash asked General Korath. "Standard first contact protocols, but with defensive measures ready," the general replied promptly. "If they are peaceful, we proceed normally. If they are hostile, we have the firepower of 12 Council worlds within range. No single fleet should pose a significant threat to our combined defenses." This was true. Harmony's Gate was not just a diplomatic station, but also a fortress. It was protected by energy shields that could withstand planetary bombardment, defensive weapon arrays that could destroy entire fleets, and the guarantee that any attack on Council property would bring swift retaliation from the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. "Very well," Threl Korvash decided. "We will maintain our schedule but remain alert. Commander Helix, please keep us informed of any developments." The session resumed, but the mood had changed. Delegates kept glancing at the chamber's main display screen, which now showed a tactical overview of local space. The approaching fleet appeared as a cluster of red dots moving steadily toward the station. As the minutes passed, the sensors began to provide more detailed information about the mysterious vessels. The ships were indeed unlike anything in the Council databases. They were built with sharp angles and aggressive lines that suggested a species more focused on warfare than the peaceful cooperation that characterized most galactic civilizations. Weapon ports were clearly visible, and the ships' hulls appeared to be armored beyond what most species considered necessary for peaceful exploration. "Updated analysis," Commander Helix announced 30 minutes later. "The fleet consists of 47 vessels of varying sizes. The largest appears to be approximately 2 kilometers in length. All ships are armed with both energy and kinetic weapons. Their technology level appears to be roughly equivalent to our own, possibly slightly more advanced in some areas." "Any identification yet?" asked Diplomat Jara 9. "We have a preliminary match," Helix replied, and there was something in his voice that made every delegate pay attention. "The ships appear to be of human origin." The chamber erupted in surprised voices, clicks, whistles, and harmonic vibrations. Human ships? The primitive species from Sector 7G? The ones who had just achieved FTL travel 3 cycles ago? It was impossible. No species developed from basic spaceflight to advanced fleet operations that quickly. "Are you certain?" Threl Korvash asked when order was restored. "The quantum signatures match the FTL drives we detected from their initial test flights. The hull materials are consistent with the metallurgy we observed on their homeworld, and we have just received a response to our communications." "What do they say?" General Korath asked. "They request permission to dock for diplomatic disque." The human ship that docked at Harmony's Gate was unlike anything the Council security teams had ever seen. The vessel was designated as a diplomatic transport, but it looked more like a weapon that happened to carry passengers. Its hull was covered in angular armor plating that seemed designed to deflect energy weapons, and every surface bristled with sensor arrays and defensive systems. Chief Security Officer Malik Tern watched through the observation windows as the airlock connected. His people had scanned the ship thoroughly, and the results were disturbing. The humans had brought weapons aboard their diplomatic vessel. Not ceremonial weapons or personal protection devices, but military-grade equipment that could level city blocks. They are requesting permission to bring an armed escort, reported Lieutenant Voss, checking his scanner readings.
6 individuals in what appears to be powered armor, plus their diplomatic team. Malik Tern frowned.
Armed escorts were not uncommon, especially for species from dangerous sectors of space. But powered armor was the equipment of serious soldiers, not diplomatic guards. How armed? He asked. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and something our scanners cannot identify. The armor itself appears to be more advanced than our standard defensive gear. And sir, the readings suggest these humans are significantly larger and more massive than our intelligence reports indicated. This was the first surprise. Council intelligence had estimated humans to be roughly the size of Altarians, perhaps slightly taller. But the beings requesting permission to board were massive by galactic standards. The largest was nearly 2.5 meters tall and appeared to weigh almost twice what a normal human should weigh. Permission granted, Malik Tern decided. The Council had hosted armed delegations before, and Harmony's Gate had more than enough security to handle any problems. But full monitoring protocols. I want to know everything they do and say. When the airlock opened, the first human through was a woman in a crisp military uniform that somehow managed to look both formal and threatening. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the controlled precision of someone trained for violence. Behind her came 6 individuals in black powered armor that made them look like walking weapons. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy, the woman announced, her voice carrying easily through the docking bay. I represent the human government in matters concerning crimes committed against our people. We request immediate audience with the Galactic Council. Malik Tern stepped forward following standard first contact protocols. Welcome to Harmony's Gate, Admiral Chen. I am Chief Security Officer Malik Tern. The Council is prepared to meet with your delegation. However, I must inform you that weapons are typically not permitted in the Council chambers. Admiral Chen looked at him with eyes that seemed to measure him as a potential threat. Our equipment will remain with us, she said simply. We are not here to threaten anyone, but we are also not here to be helpless. Given the nature of our business, I hope you understand. There was something in her tone that made Malik Tern's security instincts twinge. She was not asking for permission. She was informing him of how things would be. In 30 years of handling diplomatic security, he had never encountered a species that simply declared their intentions and expected accommodation. Of course, he replied, deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. The Council is eager to hear your concerns. As the human delegation made their way through the station corridors, other species stopped to stare. The armored escorts moved like predators, their helmeted heads constantly scanning for threats. Their equipment was clearly functional rather than ceremonial, and the weapons they carried had the worn appearance of tools that had been used in anger. In the Council chamber, the delegates had assembled an emergency session. The arrival of humans with a fleet of warships had changed the day from routine diplomacy to potential crisis management. Ambassador Threl Korvash had briefed everyone on the situation, but no one was quite prepared for what walked through the chamber doors. Admiral Chen entered first, followed by her escort. The armored humans took positions around the chamber's perimeter, their movements coordinated and professional. They did not point weapons at anyone, but their presence made it clear that they could respond to threats faster than most species could even recognize them. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Admiral Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I bring greetings from humanity and grave news of crimes committed against our people. We come seeking justice and answers. Ambassador Threl Korvash responded with traditional diplomatic courtesy. Welcome, Admiral Chen. The Council is always prepared to address legitimate grievances between species. What crimes do you speak of? Admiral Chen activated a projection device that filled the chamber's central display with images that made several delegates recoil in shock. The pictures showed human settlements that had been attacked, buildings destroyed, and clear evidence of violence against civilian populations. 7 of our colonies have been attacked over the past 2 standard years, Admiral Chen reported, her voice remaining steady despite the horrific images she was displaying. The attacks followed a consistent pattern. Unknown ships would arrive, disable our defenses, and then systematically capture our people. Buildings were destroyed to eliminate evidence, but our investigators found traces. The next images showed recovered technology, weapons, ship components, and equipment that several council members recognized immediately. The serial numbers and design patterns were clearly from member species, and the technology was restricted to authorized military and law enforcement use. We recovered these items from attack sites, Admiral Chen continued. Energy weapons from the hegemony worlds, ship components from Altarian manufacturers, communication equipment from the Etherian Collective, all of it restricted technology that should not exist outside council space. A murmur of concern rippled through the chamber. The evidence was damning, but it did not necessarily implicate the council itself. Restricted technology sometimes found its way into black markets, and pirate groups occasionally acquired military equipment through various means. That is troubling, admitted General Korath. But it does not prove council involvement. Pirates and criminal organizations sometimes acquire restricted technology. We have dealt with such problems before. Admiral Chen's expression did not change, but one of her armored escorts stepped forward and activated another projection device. This display showed DNA analysis results, communication intercepts, and financial records that made the chamber fall completely silent. We recovered biological samples from several attack sites, the Admiral continued. Crick's mandible fragments, Zalathi atmospheric residue, Phelan skin cells, hair samples from at least 3 different Gorvani individuals. These were not just using your technology. These were your people. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and denial. Several delegates began speaking at once, their translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping protests. The idea that council members would engage in illegal raids against a quarantined species was unthinkable. That is impossible, declared Sub-Ambassador Vex. No council member has authorization to operate in the human quarantine zone. Any such actions would be strictly forbidden. Admiral Chen waited for the noise to die down before responding. We thought the same thing, she said, which is why we spent 18 months tracking down the truth. What we found was a network of individuals from various council species who had been conducting unauthorized raids for the past 5 years. They were capturing members of primitive species and selling them as exotic slaves to private collectors. The final projection showed intercepted communications, financial transactions, and shipping records that painted a picture of systematic criminal activity. The evidence showed payments, delivery schedules, and even customer lists for what was clearly a well-organized slave trading operation. Over 3,000 humans have been taken, Admiral Chen reported. Men, women, and children from our frontier colonies. Some were sold as labor slaves. Others were acquired as exotic pets by wealthy collectors who wanted to own an intelligent species from a death world. Some were sold to research facilities for experimentation. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Slavery had been abolished in council space for over 1,000 years. The idea that citizens of member worlds would engage in such activities was horrifying enough. But the systematic nature of the operation was even worse. This is deeply disturbing, Ambassador Threl Korvash said finally. If your evidence is accurate, then serious crimes have been committed. The Council will immediately launch a full investigation and will prosecute any individuals found to be involved. Admiral Chen's expression remained unchanged. That is appreciated, Ambassador. However, investigation and prosecution are not why we are here. Then what do you want? Asked General Korath. We want our people back, Admiral Chen replied simply. All of them. We want the criminals responsible handed over to human authorities for justice. We want compensation for the damage done to our colonies, and we want guarantees that this will never happen again. Diplomat Jara 9's harmonic vibrations conveyed confusion. While your requests are understandable, the Council has procedures for such matters. We will need to. The silence in the Council chamber stretched on for nearly a full minute. Admiral Chen stood calmly in the center of the room, her armored escorts maintaining their positions around the perimeter. The delegates stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to growing alarm as they began to process what they had just heard. Ambassador Threl Korvash was the first to recover his diplomatic composure. Admiral Chen, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about how galactic diplomacy works. The Council appreciates your concerns and is prepared to address them through proper channels. But ultimatums are not how civilized species resolve disputes. Civilized species, Admiral Chen repeated slowly as if tasting the words. Is that what you call yourselves? Civilized species who allow their citizens to raid primitive worlds and steal children for the slave markets? Those were criminal actions by rogue individuals, protested Sub-Ambassador Vex. The Council does not condone such behavior. We will investigate and prosecute anyone found guilty of these crimes. Admiral Chen activated her personal communication device. Commander Harrison, please display the tracking data. New images appeared on the chamber's central display. These showed star charts, shipping routes, and transaction records that painted a much more comprehensive picture than the delegates had expected. The criminal network was not just a few rogue individuals. It was an organized operation that spanned multiple star systems and involved hundreds of people. We have spent the last 18 months tracking every shipment, every transaction, and every individual involved in this operation, Admiral Chen explained. We know where our people were taken. We know who bought them. We know who transported them. We know who ordered the raids. We have names, addresses, and complete records of their activities. The next display showed surveillance footage that made several delegates gasp in shock. The images were clearly taken from hidden cameras in various locations throughout Council space. They showed humans in cages being examined like animals, being sold in markets that were supposedly only for legal goods. This footage was taken on Kepler Station just 3 months ago, Admiral Chen continued. That is a human child being sold to a Velen collector who wanted an exotic pet. The buyer paid 80,000 credits for her. She was 7 years old. Diplomat Jara 9's harmonic vibrations expressed horror. This is monstrous. If this is true, immediate action must be taken. It is true, Admiral Chen said simply, and immediate action is exactly what we intend to take. The question is whether the Council will cooperate with justice or stand in the way of it. General Korath leaned forward in his seat. Admiral, you speak of justice, but you have brought a fleet of warships to Council space. That does not suggest peaceful intentions. For the first time since entering the chamber, Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. General, I think you misunderstand our intentions. We did not bring 47 ships to Council space. We brought 47 ships to this station. What do you mean? Threl Korvash asked, though something in his voice suggested he was beginning to understand. Admiral Chen activated another communication channel. Commander Martinez, please show our host the current tactical situation. The chamber's main display switched to a real-time tactical overview of Council space. What the delegates saw made every one of them freeze in shock. The 47 ships around Harmony's Gate were not the human fleet. They were just the diplomatic escort. Red markers filled the display, showing human ships positioned around every major Council world. Hundreds of vessels, from small destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, had somehow appeared throughout Council space without triggering any warning systems. Every military installation, every major population center, every strategic resource point was covered. This is impossible, General Korath whispered. Our early warning systems would have detected such a massive deployment. It would take months to position that many ships without being noticed. Your early warning systems are designed to detect ships traveling through normal space or using standard FTL techniques, Admiral Chen explained calmly. They are not designed to detect ships that do not wish to be detected. Sub-Ambassador Vex stared at the display in disbelief. How is this possible? Your species just achieved FTL travel 3 cycles ago. This level of coordination and stealth technology should be beyond your capabilities. Admiral Chen's expression grew cold. You made the mistake of thinking that achieving FTL travel was the beginning of our technological development. It was not. It was simply the point at which we became visible to your sensors. Humans have been preparing for contact with galactic civilization for much longer than you know. What do you mean? Demanded Threl Korvash. We detected Council monitoring stations in our system over 50 years ago, Admiral Chen replied. We knew we were being watched. We knew there was a galactic civilization out there. We spent those 50 years preparing for the day when we would have to deal with species that had thousands of years of technological advancement over us. The implications of her words sent a chill through the chamber. While the Council had been casually monitoring humanity as just another primitive species, The humans had been studying the Watchers. They had been learning, developing, and preparing for contact on their own terms. "You have been spying on us," General Korath accused. "We have been learning about you," Admiral Chen corrected. "Your monitoring stations were not as well hidden as you thought. Your communications were not as secure as you believed. Your databases were not as protected as you assumed. We have spent decades studying your technology, your politics, your weaknesses, and your strengths." One of her armored escorts stepped forward and activated a data pad. The chamber's display now showed detailed intelligence files on every major council member species. Military capabilities, industrial capacity, political structures, and strategic vulnerabilities were laid out with frightening precision. "We know that the hegemony worlds maintain their fleet strength through numerical superiority, but lack advanced defensive technologies," Admiral Chen continued, reading from the files as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "We know that the Etherian Collective has powerful energy weapons, but depends on imported materials for ship construction. We know that the Altarian Republic has excellent sensors, but their ships are not designed for extended combat operations." Each revelation hit the delegates like a physical blow. These were military secrets that were closely guarded by each species. The fact that humans knew such details meant they had been conducting intelligence operations throughout Council space for decades. "We also know," Admiral Chen added, "exactly where every human slave is being held, who is holding them, and how to get them back." "This is madness," protested Diplomat Jara-9. "You cannot simply threaten the entire galactic community. There are procedures, laws, diplomatic protocols that must be followed." Admiral Chen turned to face the crystalline diplomat directly. "Your procedures failed to protect our people. Your laws did not prevent our children from being stolen. Your diplomatic protocols allowed criminals to operate freely for years while our families suffered. The Council will address these crimes," Threl Korvash insisted. "Justice will be done through proper channels." "Justice will be done," Admiral Chen agreed, "but not through your channels. You had your chance to prevent this. You had your chance to stop it when it started. You failed. Now justice will be done our way." General Korath stood up from his seat, his military bearing making him tower over most of the other delegates. "Admiral Chen, I must warn you that any aggressive action against Council worlds will be met with the full military response of the galactic community. You may have achieved some tactical surprise, but you cannot fight the combined fleets of 47 worlds." Admiral Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. "General, you still do not understand. We are not here to fight your fleets. We are here to demonstrate that we do not need to." She activated her communication device again. "Commander Park, please demonstrate our capabilities for the General." The tactical display switched to show a remote area of space where 3 unmanned Council defense platforms orbited a minor asteroid mining facility. These platforms were heavily armed and shielded, designed to protect valuable resources from pirates and raiders. They represented the standard defensive technology that protected most Council installations. What happened next took exactly 12 seconds. 3 human ships appeared out of nowhere, fired weapons that the Council sensors could not even classify, and completely destroyed all 3 platforms before vanishing again. The platform's shields might as well have been tissue paper. Their armor offered no protection at all. Their return fire never even came close to hitting the attackers. Those platforms were equipped with the most advanced defensive systems in Council space, General Korath said quietly. "Yes," Admiral Chen replied. "We know. We helped design the weaknesses." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. This was not a primitive species making desperate threats. This was a carefully planned operation by beings who had spent decades preparing for this moment. The 6 hours that Admiral Chen had given the Council passed faster than anyone expected. Emergency sessions were called on every major Council world. Military commanders studied tactical reports that made no sense. Diplomats tried to find precedents for a situation that had never existed before. Political leaders struggled to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive had gained such comprehensive intelligence about their civilizations. On Harmony's Gate, the Council delegates gathered in smaller groups, trying to process what they had learned. The evidence Admiral Chen had presented was undeniable. The criminal network was real, extensive, and involved citizens from multiple member worlds. Worse, The humans had clearly spent decades preparing for this confrontation with a level of strategic planning that surpassed anything in Council military doctrine. General Korath sat in the military briefing room, staring at tactical displays that showed human ship positions throughout Council space. His staff had been running calculations for hours, and every analysis reached the same conclusion. The humans had achieved complete strategic superiority without firing a shot. "Report," he ordered his chief analyst, a young Altarian officer named Zexthorn. "Sir, the situation is unprecedented," Zexthorn replied, consulting his datapad with hands that trembled slightly. "Human ships are positioned to strike every major military installation, industrial center, and population hub in Council space. Their stealth technology allowed them to bypass our entire early warning network. Their weapons demonstrated the ability to penetrate our best defensive systems with ease." "What are our options?" Korath asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "If we mobilize the full Council fleet, we could potentially match their numbers," the analyst continued. "However, our ships would have to travel from their current positions to engage the humans. During that time, the human ships already in position could cause massive damage to undefended targets. Casualty estimates range from millions to billions, depending on whether they target military installations only or include civilian populations." General Korath closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. In 40 years of military service, he had never faced a strategic situation this hopeless. The humans had not just achieved tactical surprise. They had completely rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. "There is something else, sir," Zexthorn added quietly. "Our intelligence services have been trying to determine how the humans gathered so much information about our capabilities. Initial analysis suggests they have been conducting surveillance operations for decades. Some of our most classified military data appears to have been compromised." "How is that possible?" Korath demanded. "We are still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests they may have infiltrated our monitoring stations in their home system. The equipment we use to observe primitive species apparently served as a pathway for them to access our broader networks. They turned our own surveillance technology against us." Meanwhile, in the diplomatic wing of the station, Ambassador Threl Korvash was receiving equally disturbing reports from intelligence services throughout Council space. The scope of the human intelligence operation was staggering. They had mapped trade routes, identified key personnel, studied military doctrines, and apparently even placed observers on major Council worlds. "How did we miss this?" he asked Intelligence Director Voss Miran, a senior Etherian analyst who had coordinated Council intelligence operations for over a century. "Because we were not looking for it," Voss Miran admitted, her harmonic voice carrying notes of embarrassment and fear. "Our intelligence services focus on monitoring known threats and established powers. We have procedures for watching other Council members, tracking pirate activities, and observing hostile species. We have no protocols for detecting intelligence operations by species we classify as primitive. The humans appear to have been operating under the assumption that contact was inevitable," she continued. "While we were treating them as a curiosity to be studied at our leisure, they were treating us as a potential threat to be thoroughly understood and prepared for." The ambassador's communication device chimed with an incoming priority message. The display showed Admiral Chen's face as calm and professional as it had been during their confrontation in the Council chamber. "Ambassador Threl Korvash," Admiral Chen said without preamble. "I am calling to inform you that we will begin recovery operations in 30 minutes. We have located 17 facilities where humans are being held as slaves. We will be retrieving our people from those locations." "Admiral, please," the ambassador began. "The Council is still deliberating. We need more time to coordinate a proper response to your demands." "Time is something our people do not have," Admiral Chen replied. "Every moment of delay means more suffering for humans who should never have been taken from their homes. We will not allow that suffering to continue while your Council debates procedures." "You cannot simply attack Council facilities," Threl Korvash protested. "Such actions will be considered acts of war." Admiral Chen's expression did not change. "Ambassador, acts of war were committed when your people raided our colonies and stole our citizens. We are simply responding to hostilities that already exist. But those were criminal actions by rogue individuals," the ambassador insisted. "The Council government did not authorize them." "And yet the Council government has failed to stop them," Admiral Chen replied. Your inability to control your own citizens does not absolve you of responsibility for their crimes. If you cannot protect the innocent, then we will do it for you. The transmission switched to a tactical display showing human ships moving toward their targets. These were not the massive warships that surrounded major council worlds. These were smaller, faster vessels designed for precision operations. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of a military force that had rehearsed these operations many times. What we are about to do is not an attack, Admiral Chen explained. It is a rescue operation. We will enter each facility, retrieve our people, and leave. We will use minimal force necessary to complete our objectives. However, anyone who attempts to prevent us from recovering our citizens will be treated as a hostile combatant. Admiral, I must protest, Threl Korvash began. Your protest is noted, Admiral Chen interrupted. But our people are going home today. I suggest you inform the owners of these facilities to cooperate with our recovery teams. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. The transmission ended, leaving the ambassador staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff scrambled to contact Council security forces, but it was already too late. The human operation had begun. On Kepler Station, Security Chief Malix Rin was enjoying a quiet afternoon when his alarms began screaming. His sensors detected 3 unidentified ships approaching the station at high speed. They had appeared out of nowhere, bypassing every detection grid and security protocol. All units to defensive positions, he ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The ships were already docking, their advanced technology easily overriding his station's security systems. Whoever these intruders were, they had planned this operation with frightening precision. The first human soldiers through the airlock moved like nothing Malix Rin had ever seen. They wore powered armor that made them look like walking weapons, and they advanced through the station corridors with the coordinated efficiency of a military unit that had trained for this exact scenario. Stand down, and you will not be harmed, announced the lead figure, speaking through a translation device. We are here to retrieve stolen property. Do not interfere. Malix Rin drew his weapon, but before he could fire, something struck him with stunning force. He found himself on the ground, paralyzed but conscious, watching as the armored figures moved past him toward the station's lower levels, where the illegal markets operated. What happened next was repeated at 17 different locations throughout Council space. Human military teams entered facilities where their people were being held, disabled any resistance with non-lethal weapons, and systematically retrieved every human they could find. The operations were conducted with surgical precision, causing minimal damage to property and no casualties among those who did not resist. But for those who did resist, the results were devastating. Security forces that tried to stop the rescues found themselves facing soldiers whose equipment and training surpassed anything in their experience. Energy weapons that should have been capable of stopping powered infantry barely scratched the human armor. Defensive barriers that should have provided cover were torn apart by weapons that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. On Harmony's gate, General Korath watched the tactical displays with growing amazement and horror. The human operations were being conducted simultaneously across dozens of star systems, requiring coordination and communication capabilities that should have been impossible for a species so new to galactic civilization. Status report, he demanded. 17 facilities hit so far, reported Zexthorn. Human forces have successfully retrieved their people from each location. Local security forces have been neutralized but not eliminated. Casualty reports indicate minimal fatalities, mostly among those who offered armed resistance. What about our response? Korath asked. Council military units are moving to Int 3 days after the first rescue operations. The Galactic Council faced a crisis unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. The humans had not stopped with their initial strikes. Over 72 hours, they had systematically dismantled the entire slave trading network, retrieving over 2,000 human captives and gathering evidence that implicated hundreds of individuals across dozens of council worlds. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Financial records showed payments flowing from wealthy collectors to organized criminal groups. Communication logs revealed coordination between slavers and corrupt officials. Surveillance footage documented the abuse and mistreatment of human captives in facilities that were supposed to be legitimate businesses. Worse, the humans had begun acting on their intelligence. High-ranking officials, Wealthy merchants and even some minor nobles had been quietly disappearing from their homes and offices. They would simply vanish without trace, leaving behind only messages stating that they had been taken to face human justice for crimes against humanity. Ambassador Threl Korvash sat in his office, staring at reports that painted a picture of systematic failure. The Council's military forces had been unable to prevent a single human operation. Their intelligence services had failed to detect the scope of the human preparation. Their law enforcement agencies had been completely bypassed by criminals operating under their very noses. The situation is untenable, reported Sub-Ambassador Vex, consulting a datapad that seemed to grow heavier with each update. 12 more facilities were hit overnight. The humans retrieved another 300 of their people. They also captured 17 individuals directly involved in the slave trade and extracted complete records from each location. What is the current military assessment? Threl Korvash asked. General Korath reports that human stealth technology makes it impossible to predict or prevent their operations. Their ships appear and disappear at will. Their ground forces are equipped with weapons and armor that surpass our best military technology. Most concerning, they appear to have detailed intelligence on every Council military installation and defensive system. Threl Korvash leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on him. What do they want from us now? Admiral Chen has requested another meeting with the full Council. She says she has a proposal for ending this crisis. An hour later, the Council chamber was once again filled with delegates, but the atmosphere was completely different from their first encounter with humanity. Then, they had been curious about a primitive species with complaints. Now they were desperate to find a solution that would prevent the complete collapse of galactic order. Admiral Chen entered the chamber with the same calm confidence she had displayed before, but this time her armored escorts remained outside. She approached the central podium alone, carrying only a single datapad and an expression that suggested she held the fate of the galaxy in her hands. "Honored delegates," she began. 3 days ago I stood in this chamber and informed you that justice would be done for crimes against humanity. That justice has begun. Our people have been rescued. The criminals responsible have been identified and are being apprehended. The evidence of their crimes has been documented and preserved. However, she continued, this crisis has revealed fundamental problems with how galactic civilization operates. The slave trade we discovered was not the work of a few rogue individuals. It was a systematic operation that exploited weaknesses in Council oversight, enforcement, and accountability. The chamber remained silent as Admiral Chen activated her datapad. The main display showed a comprehensive analysis of the criminal network that had operated within Council space for years. The scope was staggering. It involved transportation networks, financial institutions, law enforcement agencies, and government officials from multiple worlds. The criminals we apprehended have provided detailed information about their operations, Admiral Chen reported. What we discovered is that this network has been operating for over a decade, targeting not just humans but primitive species throughout the galaxy. Conservative estimates suggest that over 50,000 sentient beings have been enslaved and sold through this operation. Gasps of horror echoed through the chamber. 50,000 slaves operating under the noses of the supposedly civilized galactic community was a scandal beyond imagination. The question now, Admiral Chen continued, is what happens next. Humanity has demonstrated that we have the capability to act unilaterally to protect our interests. We have shown that Council military forces cannot prevent us from taking whatever actions we deem necessary. We have proven that your laws and procedures mean nothing if we choose to ignore them. General Korath leaned forward in his seat. Admiral, are you threatening the Council? General, I'm stating facts, Admiral Chen replied. The question is whether those facts lead to cooperation or conflict. That choice is yours to make. Ambassador Threl Korvash spoke carefully. What would cooperation look like, Admiral? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. The Council has the opportunity to learn from this crisis and improve. Humanity is prepared to work with galactic civilization, but not under the old rules that allowed our people to be stolen and sold. She activated another display that showed a detailed proposal for reforming Council oversight and enforcement procedures. We propose the creation of a joint task force with expanded authority to investigate and prosecute crimes against primitive species. This task force would include human personnel and would have access to advanced surveillance and enforcement technology. You want to become part of Council law enforcement? Asked Sub-Ambassador Vex. We want to ensure that what happened to our people never happens again, Admiral Chen replied. To anyone, the slave trade we uncovered targeted dozens of species. Every one of those species deserves protection. Diplomat Jera 9's harmonic vibrations expressed cautious interest. What authority would this task force have? The authority to investigate suspected crimes against primitive species anywhere in Council space, Admiral Chen answered. The authority to access financial records, communication logs, and surveillance data. The authority to apprehend suspects and seize evidence. The authority to coordinate with local law enforcement or act independently when local authorities are compromised. The delegates exchanged concerned glances. What Admiral Chen was describing was essentially a supranational police force with unprecedented powers and human oversight. And if the Council refuses this proposal? General Korath asked. Admiral Chen's expression hardened again. Then humanity will continue to act unilaterally to protect primitive species from exploitation. We will consider any continuation of the slave trade to be an act of war against humanity. We will respond accordingly. That would mean permanent conflict between humanity and the Council, Threl Korvash pointed out. It would mean permanent conflict between humanity and anyone who enslaves innocent people, Admiral Chen corrected. The Council can choose which side of that conflict it wants to be on. The chamber fell silent as the delegates contemplated their options. They could accept the human proposal and essentially surrender part of their sovereignty to a species they had dismissed as primitive, or they could refuse and face an enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to strike anywhere in Council space with impunity. There is another consideration, Admiral Chen added. Humanity possesses technology that could benefit all Council members. Our stealth systems, our weapons technology, our intelligence-gathering capabilities. These could be shared with Council forces to improve security throughout the galaxy. You would share your military technology? General Korath asked, surprised. With appropriate safeguards and oversight, yes, Admiral Chen replied, but only in the context of a partnership based on mutual respect and shared responsibility for protecting the innocent. Ambassador Threl Korvash looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. The Council will need time to consider this proposal. Of course, Admiral Chen agreed. But while you deliberate, we will continue our operations. Every day of delay means more potential victims remain at risk. We will not allow that to continue. How long do we have? Asked Sub-Ambassador Vex. You have as long as it takes for the Council to make a decision, Admiral Chen replied. But understand that every criminal we apprehend, every facility we shut down, every operation we disrupt, makes it more difficult to maintain the fiction that Council oversight is effective. Eventually, primitive species throughout the galaxy will learn that the only real protection they have is human protection. The implications of her words were clear. If the Council did not act quickly, humanity would effectively replace Council authority in dealing with crimes against primitive species. They would become the protectors of the weak and the enforcers of justice, whether the established galactic powers approved or not. Admiral, Diplomat Jera 9 asked, what assurance do we have that humanity will honor any agreement we reach? Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. The same assurance you had that your own laws would protect primitive species from exploitation. The difference is that when humans make a